The phone rang sharply next to the head of the sleeping Terry Gilson. He woke up abruptly. "What the hell?" he growled. The phone rang again. He picked up the receiver. "Hello," he murmured in a heavy, low cough. "Mr. Gilson?" "Yes." "This is Sergeant Preston from the Yukon County Police Department. May I speak to Mrs. Turvey?" roared an authoritative voice in Gilson's ear. "Who is this?" "Mr. Gilson, please connect me to Mrs. Turvey. This is a police emergency." Again, the clear and demanding tone. "Just a moment," Gilson muttered. He handed the receiver to the woman lying beside him. "For you." "It's the police," he said simply. "What?" She snatched the phone from his hands. "Hello?" "Good morning, my dear unfaithful wife," came the all-too-cheerful greeting. "I hope you slept well last night after you and your lover finished having fun." "Oh my God, Mick. Mick, is that you?" "You bet it is, honey, it's me. I just called to give you some information you'll need." Mick, please," she tried. "First of all, you can throw away your house key. It doesn't work anymore. Also, I changed the code on the garage door opener." "Mick, please. It's not what you think," she cried. "You don't know what I think, Sheila. But I didn't call to discuss it with you. I just called to tell you that your credit cards don't work anymore, and you can pick up your clothes and toiletries in the plastic tubs behind the side gate anytime you want." The voice became as cold as ice. No, Mick, please. Don't do this. Please," my wife pleaded desperately. "It's too late, darlings. I've already done it." "But where will I go?" she cried. "Well, in the immortal words of Rhett Butler, frankly, my dear, I don't care." The tube was slammed down in anger. I had started this process weeks ago, but this morning was the decisive moment. If I hadn't been so sure she was asleep in Gilson's room, I wouldn't have even tried this trick. I was surprised at how easily it came out and how empty the moment seemed. A cuckold's victory, I thought. Too little, too late. I suppose it's appropriate to describe my situation. My name is Michael Mick Turvey. I am 43 years old, and I work as a sales representative for a building materials company. I have been with this company for over 20 years. I married Sheila Pratt almost exactly 20 years ago. We were to celebrate our 20th anniversary next month. I considered the marriage a success, for we had 2 wonderful children. Our first, Angela, my angel, was born a year and a half after we were married, and Ben, our son, was born 2 years later. I loved my wife and my children unconditionally. They were the meaning of my existence. No man could be prouder of his family than I was. We lived in a modest home, but it had everything a family could want. The 3-bedroom split level was our second home, purchased 4 years ago. It wasn't new, but we decided to update it and make it our own. A new kitchen, then a finished basement with a workshop for me, and a large family room that the kids could use for their entertainment. A garage where we actually parked our cars, and then new furniture for the living room and dining room. I felt like we had the perfect life. I met Sheila when we were both in 11th grade and middle school. She was a pretty blonde with a nice body, so it wasn't hard to notice her. She tried out for cheerleading but was unsuccessful. I played receiver on the football team and thought we might make a good couple. I asked her out right after school started in the fall, and she said yes. We dated for a few months, and during that time, Sheila matured into a very pretty girl. I wasn't the only one who noticed. I thought we were dating, but apparently never confirmed it with Sheila. The next thing I knew, our quarterback Terry Gilson asked her out, and she said yes. I couldn't understand it. I thought we were a couple, but apparently I was wrong. Gilson was the star of our team. He was a big, talented high school senior with a strong arm and a will to win unlike anything I had ever encountered. As a quarterback, he was a coach's dream and a coach's nightmare. He had tremendous talent and fearlessness, but he just couldn't follow orders. As the rest of the team realized, Terry was not a team player. Terry was just Terry. Our team finished that season with a winning record, but I wondered how much better we could have been if Terry had stuck to the coach's script instead of making it up as he went along. For all his talent, he was undisciplined and very frustrating to others who worked in his shadow. Terry often bragged about entertaining every cheerleader at least once. I was grateful that Sheila wasn't a cheerleader, but I wasn't sure that would protect her. It made no sense to me to be mad at Gilson. He was what he was, a ruthless womanizer. He viewed these young girls as meat on his plate and intended to enjoy them. Nothing personal, just fun. I was hurt that Sheila had fallen for him, but I knew there was nothing I could do about it. Next year, Terry would be gone and Sheila and I would still be here. Maybe I still had a chance. But it didn't happen. I started dating Marilyn Erlacher. Since the seating at our school was most often alphabetical, more often than not, Marilyn sat behind me and had me in her sights. Marilyn was a nice girl, but it wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted something more exciting, but it was too much of Miss Erlacher. We got along fine, and I think she was impressed that a football player was interested in her, but that was about it. In the spring, I started looking for her replacement. Meanwhile, Gilson had dumped Sheila in favor of some other girl, and she was single again. I thought about it, but given the way she dumped me, I decided to ignore her. By the end of the year, she had found someone else, and I was out again. 12th grade was different. Roger Davidson took the quarterback spot on our team and was everything Terry Gilson wasn't. He was a leader and a better team player. He looked to us to determine who would do the best job. I thought more than once that this guy could make a coach. He understood what it took to win and to get the most out of what the team had to offer. The result was great. I was catching passes like never before, and we were winning regularly. When Roger would enter the huddle, there was silence. He would give the assignment and make sure everyone knew the shot count. All of this was new to me, and I was enjoying it. I continued to avoid Sheila, my ego still bruised from the Gilson incident. I wasn't really surprised when Roger started dating her. For all his talent and leadership, he was a quiet guy, and it was hard not to like him. Oddly enough, I was fine with them. If I couldn't be with her, Roger was my choice. I think she felt the same way. Sheila wasn't the smartest girl in school. In fact, she scraped by with a C and graduated, like many of her classmates, with a job. She never had plans for college. She must have realized her limitations. She took a job as a bank teller at the mall. After high school graduation, she and I lost touch. I was on my way to college and already dreamed of playing football, drinking beer with the boys, and dating only the prettiest girls who would aspire to be with the football hero. By Christmas, reality set in. I had failed 3 subjects, and while I enjoyed every minute I spent on the football field, the rest of the campus experience wasn't as enjoyable. There wasn't a line of girls waiting to date me. Beer was downtown and expensive for my limited budget. Classes were excruciating, and it was hard for me to realize that the learning process was solely up to me. There was no one to monitor me and make sure I was attending class or completing assignments. It was a whole different world. The grades posted on the board at the end of the semester were disappointing. I was in danger of dropping out of school. Well, I said to myself, next semester there would be no football and no girls. I might as well get on with it. It wasn't easy. It was a whole new way of life for me. It was a struggle. I made it through, but not by much. I had a year of college under my belt, and I wondered if this was what I wanted to do for the next 3 years. If I asked that question, it was clear to me that the answer was no. I found a job in an office in the city, and every morning I would get on the bus, work my 9 hours, get on the bus again, and drive home. After only a few months, I realized that this couldn't be my future. I needed something more. I lasted almost 2 years, but I was constantly looking for something better. If you were to ask me what my career would be when I graduated, I would have no idea. I certainly wouldn't include the sales category. In my mind, a salesperson is someone who goes door to door selling brushes, kitchen utensils, or magazines. That's definitely not me. When I saw what industrial sales was all about, I had a different perspective. You had to know your product and show people that it was a good, if not better product than the one they were using, and then convince them to buy it. More importantly, the technical side was something I could get passionate about. It didn't take me long to realize that sales is a strategy. What do you have that the customer needs? Why would he want to buy it from you? I applied for a transfer to one of the operating branches and got the opportunity to work in sales. That was the beginning, and the more I saw, the more I realized that this was what I wanted to do. I went to work, still not owning a car and living at home. When I moved to the operations department, nothing had changed. I was a rookie with a small paycheck and took the bus to and from work. When I got my first paycheck, I decided to open a bank account. Up until that point, I had been living from paycheck to paycheck, and that was about to change. For convenience, I chose a bank near the bus stop and walked in. As I approached the customer service counter, I stopped in my tracks. The young woman who was soon to serve me was named Sheila Pratt. I was a little flustered, but since there were several other people ahead of me, I had a chance to calm down and think about what I wanted to say. I hadn't seen her in 3 years, but as I studied her, she turned out to be just as beautiful as I remembered her. It didn't take Sheila long to take care of the people in front of me, and then it was my turn. "Hi, Sheila," I said, stepping forward. She obviously didn't know I was in line and was surprised to see me in front of her. "Hi, Mick," she said after a moment's pause. What can I do for you?" "I'd like to open an account. I need to transfer my paycheck." Oh, sure. Let me get someone from the staff to help you," she said, smiling. "Yes, thank you. It's good to see you again," I offered weakly. "Yes, it's good to see you too." The smile was genuine, I thought. A week later, I went back to the bank to pick up my blank printed checks and saw Sheila again. This time she was walking down the street, delivering mail, I realized. I watched her as I stood in line and wondered what was going on in her life. There was only one way to find out. And after picking up the box of checks at the service counter, I looked around for Sheila and saw her standing at a side table, obviously not doing anything. I walked over to her. "Hi again," I said, smiling. "Hi, how are you?" she asked. Her smile was the one I remembered from when we were dating. It was sincere, honest, and very attractive. "I'm fine. I work at Polar Industries now. Doing sales," I offered. "Good for you. Do you like it? Does it have a good future?" she asked, seeming interested. "Yes. I like the company and the products they represent. I guess I'm lucky." "Good, Mick. I'm glad to hear that." Sheila, would you like to have coffee with me? Or something?" Hesitantly, I asked. "We could talk about what's been going on." "Sure. That would be good. I'm getting off in a few minutes." "Why don't you wait for me and we could go to the coffee shop next door?" she suggested. "Great," I said with a wide smile. "I'll be waiting out front on a bench." Thus began our reunion, and after a few dates, we were back where we had been before. I was 21 years old and just starting to build a career, and Sheila was looking for a husband. I proposed the following spring and she accepted. A year later in May, we were married, and we were both excited about our future. A year and a half after our wedding, Angela was born. She was a daddy's girl from the moment she was born. When she was little, if she was upset or crying, I would pick her up in my arms, she would calm down, smile at me, and all was well again. I always thought I wanted a son, but Angie was everything I could have ever wished for. Our son Ben was born 2 years later, and I was as happy as only a father can be. Sheila was Ben's special parent, and I was Angela's special parent. It was the perfect family, I thought. Sheila often told me the same thing. She was happy and content with our lives, she told me. We had our moments, but they never lasted long, and I knew I was lucky. I had a wonderful wife and 2 wonderful children. Right after Angie was born, I was given a sales territory and was on cloud 9. I settled in like a duck on water, and within a couple years, I was making almost double what I was making when I started. Success breeds success, and I was now earning much more than I expected when I started Polar. 5 years later, we were able to buy our first house. It was a small bungalow, but it was ours alone. Sheila spent hours leafing through magazines looking for the right things. Angie and Ben contributed too, but it was Sheila who chose the decor and colors. I just stood in admiration of how my family came together. We celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary at the same house, and over 30 people showed up for the anniversary party. I was proud of my accomplishments, but I was even prouder of my family. My children were well-behaved and excelled in school. My wife was an exemplary housewife and mother. Both parents believed that the sun and moon revolved around us. What more could I want? When Angie turned 14, she started menstruating. At first, Sheila was happy to help Angie understand what was happening and how to deal with it. Things went well for a few weeks, and then I noticed a change. Angie didn't seem to be as close to her mother as she used to be. It wasn't an obvious change, but to me, who was close to my daughter, it was noticeable. I could not find a reason for this change in attitude, and discussing it with Sheila proved frustrating. She did not want to discuss or even acknowledge this change. She claimed it was my imagination and a man's inability to understand female psychology. It still bothered me, but since it didn't seem to affect the rest of the family, I accepted it. Ben always seemed balanced. He and his mother were very close, and although I loved him as much as Angie did, I knew that in the event of a serious problem, he would turn to his mother for help first. That didn't bother me in the least. All families form alliances with their parents, and they should have been recognized and respected. Through my successes, I continued to climb the career ladder, and while I realized that sales management was probably not what I was cut out for, I wished I had at least been offered the opportunity. I had my most productive and profitable territory, and I wondered what it would take to take the next step. It finally dawned on me that in order for such an opportunity to arise, a position had to be filled. Shortly after Angie entered high school, Sheila came to me and asked if I would mind if she went back to work. She had been a stay-at-home soccer mom for 16 years and felt like she wanted something to do besides washing, ironing, and sewing. I couldn't think of a single reason why not, but asked her to make sure that whatever she chose would not interfere with the children's lives and our ability to enjoy free time together. She assured me that it would not interfere. After months of searching, she found a job at a car dealership as a receptionist. It wasn't full-time and it suited both of us. She worked there in the mornings from 9 to 1 o'clock, Monday through Saturday. Since I was playing golf on Saturday mornings, I figured that schedule would suit me just fine. It didn't pay much, but we didn't starve, and her extra earnings could be used as vacation pay. If it suited her, it suited me. Our life went on for a couple more years until one day Sheila came home with a disturbing message. "Guess what, Mick?" she said, not without some trepidation. "What?" "Terry Gilson's back in town," she said, watching my reaction carefully. "Oh, what brought him back?" "You know his father is a big businessman. Terry is now the assistant general manager at his father's dealership," she said, still not being as nonchalant as she wanted to appear. "And what dealership is that?" I asked, knowing the answer perfectly well. Where I work, Century Ford," she replied, stammering. "And what does that mean to you?" I asked, starting to see something else creep into the picture. I'll be, I mean, I've been asked to hire his assistant," she finally managed. "Wow, that's a big step, from part-time administrator to assistant to the general manager. I didn't realize they had such a large staff." I'm sure my tone was sarcastic, and I didn't try to hide it. "You don't seem very happy," she remarked. "No, you've been seeing Gilson. I've been playing with him. We both know what kind of guy he is. He bragged about all his conquests. Is your name still on his list?" It was a cheap shot, and I realized it as soon as it came out of my mouth. "That's a terrible thing to say. Are you telling me you don't trust me?" she demanded. I had to clam up. "No. I'm telling you I don't trust him. Her face reddened, and for the first time in a long, long time, she was really angry. Mick, take that back. You have no right to accuse me of anything, and what's more, you just said I can't be trusted, she muttered. I made no such statement. I said I didn't trust him. I said we both know what kind of snake he is. It may have been 20 years, but leopards don't change their spots. I made sure she understood that I wouldn't back down an inch. Just ask yourself, I continued. How does a part-time secretary go from an entry-level position to assistant to the boss's son in one step? I'd like to know, I demanded. Because I have a talent for the job, she snapped back. Terry said I was just made for it. You don't think I have the aptitude, do you? She tossed back. I don't. I don't work there. But one thing I do know is that this whole deal smells like typical Gilson. He's setting you up, and you'd better be very careful, my dear. Now I was standing right in front of her. She couldn't help but understand my misgivings and suspicions about Terry Gilson's motives. I could only hope that my message had hit the mark. You're jealous. You don't want me to succeed because it will make you look bad. That's the thing. You're jealous, she scoffed. The argument was going nowhere, and she wasn't listening. I sighed heavily, turned around and went down to the basement for a cold beer and some time to think. I had no illusions about Gilson's motives. He had seen an attractive woman he thought he could get without much effort. What did it matter if she was married? He probably remembered me from high school and didn't think I was much of a nuisance. I would follow the situation closely, of that I was sure. It was a week before we were back to a quiet family life. My argument with Sheila had unfortunately been overheard by our children. It would have been hard not to hear us as we both raised our voices. As always, once things had calmed down, Angie came to me when I was alone. Hi, Daddy, are you okay? Hi, Angie. Yeah, I'm fine, I lied. I couldn't help but hear the fight, she admitted. Who's the guy, Gilson? The one your mom dated in high school. He was our quarterback, and I played with him for a year. I tried to warn your mom. He's not a very nice guy and doesn't have much respect for women, I said sadly. I don't think you told your mom what she wanted to hear, she said softly. No, I think not. I think she sees this as a big opportunity and an important job. She'll probably go from part-time to full-time, so I guess there will be some changes in our routine, I suggested. That's okay, Dad. I can help with meals and laundry and stuff. I guess she'll be making a lot more money now, won't she? I guess so. We haven't talked about that. I'll have to wait and see, Angie. I hope this doesn't turn out to be a big mistake for your mom, I said, putting my hand on her shoulder and pulling her to me. I just hope everything turns out okay. As I'd suspected, it was a full-time job, and the pay was more than double her previous earnings, so in that respect, she was being handsomely rewarded for her role. However, I had my doubts about the job. When I cautiously asked Sheila what she did during the day, she answered vaguely, but what I heard sounded very unstructured. If I interpreted what she was telling me, it appeared that she had to come running on Gilson's call. As time went on, I became less and less concerned about her work. She left for work a little before 9 every morning and got home shortly after 5 in the evening. No overtime, no special assignments, just routine work. As a result, we didn't have to sacrifice much. My workday was longer than hers, and I often found myself home after 6, leaving in the mornings at 7. I would leave before everyone was up, and so my family time was limited to evenings and weekends. Our sex life was never what I would call hot. It just wasn't Sheila. We did it, usually a couple times a week, but it was plain vanilla stuff. After Gilson arrived, I'd kept a close eye on the changes in our lives, but there was nothing unusual about it. We did pretty much the same things we had been doing before. I always tried to get along with the neighbors. It made life so much easier. The McDonalds on one side of us were quiet people and quite elderly. Their children had grown up and moved away, and we didn't have much in common with them. We were polite and helped each other if needed, but otherwise, we weren't close. The Romanos on the other side were quite different. Their children were younger, and Angie often babysat for them during the first few years we were there. We got along very well with them, and often had backyard barbecues and card parties at each other's houses. Jimmy and Felicia were probably our best friends. Jimmy was an accountant and worked at the big GM dealership in town. I had already forgotten about it, but when he drove home a van with the dealership's name on the side, I remembered. One late Sunday morning, Jimmy was mowing the lawn before mowing, and I walked up to him for a minute. "Hey Jimmy, how's it going?" I began. "Well, you know, the usual stuff. I guess everything's okay," he grinned. "Yeah, same thing. Say, I have a question for you." I tried to make it sound casual. "Shoot. You work at a large dealership. Does the general manager usually have an assistant? I mean, an assistant general manager?" "Yes. Big dealerships usually have someone to back up the boss when he's not around." "Does this assistant have an assistant, say, a Friday girl?" He looked at me strangely, and then I saw a light come on in his eyes. His face turned funny, and he looked very uncomfortable. "Not usually," he finally said. "I didn't think so," I said, nodding. "Thanks, Jimmy." I turned and headed back to the house. My suspicions were confirmed. "Mick," he called out to me. I stopped and turned around as he came toward me. "I know what you're thinking. I have some acquaintances there. Let me see what I can find on QT," he said in a quiet voice. I looked at him for what seemed like a very long time, then nodded. "Thanks again." I'm not quite sure why, after all that, I asked Jimmy that question. Perhaps I was afraid of the answer. There hadn't been the slightest hint that anything was going on, but I suppose it had kept me on my toes, and for that matter, still did. Jimmy knew who Sheila worked for and what her position was, but he never said a word about it. I just put him on the spot, and he reacted the way a good friend should. Even though Sheila was no longer working Saturday morning, I continued to play golf early. The Saturday following my conversation with Jimmy turned out to be cool and windy, but at least it didn't rain. I played with our usual foursome, and none of us played very well. The wind intensified the cold, and none of us were very comfortable. We were all glad to finish the round and get to the clubhouse. As usual, we met at the 19th hole after changing, and the winners drank to the losers. Today, my partner and I were shopping. As I entered the lounge, I saw Jimmy Romano sitting alone at a table by the TV. He was sipping a drink, and I walked over to him. "I didn't know you played golf," I said with a smile. "I don't know. You know me better than that," he laughed. "What brought you here?" I asked, almost guessing the answer. "I wanted to talk to you. Alone," he said, suddenly becoming serious. I nodded. I was sure that was what it was about. "Give me a minute to settle with the winners and I'll be right back," I promised. It didn't take me long to buy drinks for the boys and explain that I had to excuse myself to meet someone. 5 minutes later, I was already sitting at Jimmy's table. "So I can assume you heard something about my question the other day," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Yeah. I wish I had better news, Mick. I really wish it was," he said sadly, hardly looking me in the eye. "Tell me straight, Jimmy. I can handle it," I said, with more confidence than I felt at that moment. "Well, Gilson is probably the most unpopular guy in this dealership. The people I've talked to consider him a leech on the side of the business and completely useless. He goes around and pisses off everyone he encounters. He has nothing to do because no one wants him to do anything. He'll just screw things up, as he's demonstrated many times before." Jimmy stopped and sipped from his glass. "No surprise there," I said, trying to remain calm. "So where's Sheila?" He looked at me with the most hunted look I'd ever seen on his face. He really didn't want to tell me what he was going to tell me. "Sheila sits in his office most of the day, occasionally typing letters and bringing him coffee. The only time she acts fast is when old man Gilson shows up, and she quickly disappears into the parts department or the employee break room. When the old man leaves, everything goes back to normal," Jimmy says. I guess old man Gilson doesn't know about Sheila and her mysterious job, I said sullenly. Jimmy only nodded. Then he paused, and I realized that there was more to it. Spill it, Jimmy. I won't bite, I promised. The two of them go out to lunch about twice a week. They leave before noon and don't get back until 2 or 2:30. Since she's been there? I asked, finally shocked. No. It started a few months later, he suggested. One day, one of their clever salesmen followed them. They went to the Carlton Hotel on Banner Road. A long way for lunch, I suggested. Mick, there's no restaurant at the Carlton, he said in almost a whisper. I felt everything inside me clench. I was locked in place, unable to move. I heard my own intermittent breathing, trying to get my thoughts in order. Although I suspected this might happen, I wasn't prepared for it. I can't remember how long it took before I was able to form a coherent thought. I'm sorry, Mick. I really didn't mean to be the guy who, he muttered. I know, I huffed. I didn't want to hear that either. We had another drink with Jimmy and reminisced about the good times our families had spent together. There were many happy memories, but it felt like we were saying goodbye to each other in a way. I think we both realized now that things would never be the same again. I could feel that pain in my gut, and it hurt. I drove home, preparing to see Sheila, and wondering how I was going to handle this revelation. I had been strangely calm with Jimmy, and it seemed odd that I would be able to handle this devastating news. I tried to imagine any scenario that would make their afternoon visits to the Carlton anything other than sexual, but I realized it was unlikely. What was on the surface was what was happening. It wasn't until I was halfway home from the golf club that I started to get angry. My head was spinning with 1,000 random thoughts all at once, and my emotions were in turmoil before it all started to boil down to one horrible fact. She had cheated on me, and cheated on me many, many times. I was a fool, even though I knew the possibility existed. She made a fool of me and didn't even blink an eye without feeling the slightest sense of guilt. Day after day, she made me a cuckold. It was then, with that realization, that the anger began to build. I pride myself on being rational and not prone to rash behavior. I pulled over to the curb a few blocks from my house because I knew I was in no condition to go into my house and confront Sheila. Moreover, it wouldn't be the smartest thing to do. In fact, I was sure it wasn't. If I thought it was just a one-time affair, I might have been able to get over it, and we could move on with our lives. But it wasn't. Apparently, it had been going on for a year. All this time, Sheila had been playing the role of a happy housewife with a loving family. It was a deception of a very high order. Sitting in my idle car, I decided that this required a very high order of payback. I will act as normal as possible, but on Monday, I will begin the process to put an end to this farce and get my revenge. I am determined that I will do as much damage as possible to Terry Gilson and Sheila Pratt-Turvey. I will go by the book and by the law, but I will do everything I can to bring them both down. The rest of the weekend passed in excruciating politeness on my part. I was tight-lipped, not allowing my anger and frustration to spill out onto my family. There was plenty of time for that when all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. I counted the hours until Monday morning. When Monday finally came, I got up earlier than usual and was out of the house well before 7. I knew I had a few hours before I could get to work on my problem, but I wanted to get out of our house as soon as possible that morning. I knew that my sales manager, Larry Coleman, was already in the office, and I needed to talk to him about taking some time to address my problem. Our conversation took over half an hour. I figured he had guessed what might be going on in my family life when I explained what I wanted in terms of a vacation, and thankfully, he was receptive and agreed. He was a nice guy, and I enjoyed working with him. And just after 9 in the morning, I called David Murney, our family lawyer, and asked for his advice on a family matter. I knew it was not his area of expertise and was not surprised when he referred me to Lydia Pankratz. I had met Lydia in passing once or twice and had heard that she was a very good divorce attorney. She won't be cheap, but right now cost was on the back burner for me. I made an appointment with Lydia for late afternoon. I knew I would be late, so I called home to leave a message. Angie answered the phone, which surprised me. Hi, Angie, what are you doing home? Teacher Professional Development Day, she said, with a tinge of mockery. Ever notice how they're always on Fridays or Mondays? Yeah, I've noticed. Look, I have a meeting late tonight, and I won't be home until 7, I think. Let Mom know, okay? Sure, Dad. Say, are you okay? She asked in a curious voice. Yeah, sure. Why do you ask? I don't know. You didn't seem like yourself this weekend. You weren't sick or anything, were you? No, I lied. I'm fine. It's probably your overactive imagination, I laughed. We signed off and I hung up the phone, wondering if Sheila had noticed my unusual behavior. She didn't say anything, but maybe she was being cautious. I'd have to follow up on that. I didn't want to give a false answer too soon. Meeting Lydia was a shock in many ways. To begin with, regardless of the reason, Sheila got half of everything in the divorce. The house, the cars, everything. The only good news was that her income was such that I probably wouldn't have to pay alimony if I could prove infidelity. Judging by her reckless behavior, I doubted I would have any trouble getting proof. As for the children, I would have to prove abuse, neglect, or some other heinous crime to get custody. In this jurisdiction, children were almost always given to the mother. Angie was 18, so she could make her own decision, but Ben was only 16 and would have to spend almost 2 years with his mother. I felt bad, but Lydia said I probably couldn't change anything. That's just the way the system works. That's when things got interesting. Lydia knew I wanted to punish both Sheila and Gilson and said she could help. Since Gilson was her boss, I could sue both him and the company he worked for as co-defendants in the divorce case. In other words, since so many people knew about their little game and did nothing to stop it or report it, we could sue them for a very large sum of money. Better yet, none of that money would go to Sheila. Lydia said she would make inquiries about Century Ford and begin the paperwork for the divorce proceedings. At this point, the reason for the divorce remained open. I was to decide whether it would be irreconcilable differences or infidelity. Lydia suggested that since their liaisons were so predictable, it would not be difficult or expensive to get some photographic evidence to bolster the case. I told her I would think about it. When I got home that evening, I was greeted by a happy Sheila, informing me that my dinner was already in the oven and she had poured me a glass of wine. I was immediately suspicious. Such behavior was unusual for her. I went upstairs, changed my clothes, washed my face, and went down to the table. When I sat down at the table, Sheila sat down as well, also with a glass of wine. I have some interesting news, Mick, she began with a wide smile. Huh? I've been invited to the regional dealer convention next month in Marysville, she said proudly. Really? Just you? I asked, almost knowing the answer before I even asked it. Well, no. Terry and Kurt Jenkins are going too, she said with some nervousness. Oh, I see. And how long does this convention last? 3 days. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'll be back on Sunday. Now the nervousness was fully evident. You seem to be looking forward to it, I quipped. Yeah. This will be my very first convention. I'm sure I'll learn a lot. She changed in an instant. Now she had that happy enthusiasm in her again that she had a moment ago. Yes, I'm sure you will learn, I replied with a touch of sarcasm. As my mind picked up on my emotions, I began to realize that this could be the opportunity I was looking for. She almost set herself up to be caught. So, you're okay with this? She asked uncertainly. Yes, darling, I don't mind. I trust you. I know you won't do anything inappropriate, I said, with all the candor I could muster. I saw a blush appear on her face for a moment before she stood up, leaned across the table, and kissed me. Thanks, Mick. I finished my meal in silence, and Sheila went back into the living room to watch some mindless TV program. I found it strange that I wasn't upset or angry or anything. I was numb. I had just allowed my wife to go out of town for 3 days and have fun with some asshole I hated, and I felt nothing. The next 2 days went fine, just fine. I was getting through my work, but my mind was a jumble of thoughts, and I was wondering how it was all going to turn out. I started thinking about Ben and Angie. What would they think? How would they react? When I destroyed their mother, would they hate me? I couldn't think of a way to protect them from what I was about to do, other than to call the whole thing off and let Sheila continue doing what she was doing. Deep down, I knew I would never let that happen. On Thursday morning, Lydia called me at my office and asked me to meet with her in the afternoon. We set the time for 3 and I arrived early. I wanted to bring her up to speed and start the process. I made a few decisions. Lydia, something interesting happened on Monday. Sheila told me that she has been invited to attend the regional Ford dealer convention that will be held in 3 weeks in Marysville. It won't surprise you to learn that she'll be going with Terry Gilson and another guy from their office. I paused, waiting for her reaction. You're right. It's no surprise at all. My sources tell me this whole thing has been set up for a long time. I guess she finally got up the courage to tell you on Monday, she said calmly. Yeah, Monday. How did you find out? I asked with a smile. Well, it's a trade secret. But let's just say she's not as smart as she thinks she is, Lydia grinned. I decided that we should try to get some pictures. Will that allow us to file an infidelity report? I asked. Yes, definitely. Now we know they use the same room at the same hotel every time. That's silly. My friend is getting some photographic evidence this week, and that should be enough to make the case. But that's not all, she grinned. I watched her satisfied smile and waited for the next bit of news. Century Ford is owned by Terry Gilson's father, Knox Gilson, as you probably know. I know there is a morals clause in every employee's contract, and this will make an additional lawsuit much easier for us. In fact, it will be a piece of cake, she smiled slyly. How much do you think we can get them for? I asked, feeling the anger welling up inside me. Well, we can get anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million, but of course we'll ask for a lot more. God knows Father Terry can afford it, she laughed. I really like the sound of that. I guess the only bad thing is the kids. I can protect Angie, but I can't do anything for Ben, I said, suddenly realizing how fast things were moving. I know, and there's not a damn thing I can do about it. Unless we get a judge who thinks Sheila is scum, we're going to have to live with it. I'm sorry, but I wish it wasn't so, she said with genuine pity. All right, Lydia. Thanks for the shovel work. I'll let you know when and where the convention will be held and what hotel she'll be staying at in case your boyfriend can't figure anything out before then. I was tired. The whole shebang had knocked the energy out of me. I wanted to go home and go to bed for a week or 3, hoping it would all be over by then. Of course, I knew that wasn't going to happen. There was still a long way to go. I managed to get through the next 3 weeks without arousing Sheila's suspicions. Maybe she wasn't paying attention, or maybe she was so sure of herself that she didn't worry about it. On the eve of her departure, she packed and carried her suitcase and travel bag to the front door, preparing to leave in the morning. She had no idea what was in store for her this weekend. When I got up Thursday morning at my usual time, Sheila was already up and eating breakfast. She was definitely anxious to leave and was pacing the kitchen very nervously. You're up early, I remarked coldly. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure everything was looked after before I left. Don't worry about that. Angie will take care of the household chores, and I'll help her on the weekends. I take it you'll be home Sunday morning? I suggested. I'm not sure if it will be in the morning or afternoon. We'll have to wait and see. It's Terry's car, so I'll let you know, she said hesitantly. She avoided my gaze. She knew what she had to do, but she didn't want to look me in the eye and admit it to herself. She couldn't know that there was no getting away from this weekend. Well, have a good time and be on your best behavior, I said, without a fraction of sarcasm. She threw me a brief glance and then continued with her uncoordinated actions. I couldn't recall ever seeing her so nervous. Perhaps she sensed a change in my attitude and was afraid I might recognize or suspect something. I couldn't tell. I finished my coffee, kissed her lightly on the cheek, and headed for the office. All day I wondered if she thought I knew something. It might ruin my surprise, and that would really upset me. I didn't tell Lydia or anyone else what I had planned for early Sunday morning. Arriving at the office, I called Lydia, and she quickly picked up the phone. Lydia, can you confirm that we have pictures of Gilson and Sheila in action? I quickly asked. Yes, we have them, but I don't think you'll want to see them. Maybe after this is over. But for now, just let us deal with it, okay? She spoke in a muffled voice, and you couldn't tell from her tone that she wasn't happy. I had to assume that the pictures were going to be quite denigrating. The only good thing about it was that it no longer mattered whether my little stunt on Sunday morning had worked or not. Now, the matter was settled. Are the divorce papers ready? Yes, we can file them anytime you say. I have a little surprise for her on Sunday morning, so I think we can hand her the papers at her parents' house on Monday morning. Can I confirm that on Sunday? I asked. Yes, but, Mick, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you? There was concern in her voice. No, absolutely not. I won't do anything that would mess things up. I promise. I hoped my statement had reassured this dynamic lady. I didn't want anything to mess up my plans. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Take care of yourself, Mick. I know these are hard times for you, but they'll pass and you'll move on. I know it, she said sincerely. Lydia, I couldn't have done it without your help. The hardest thing left is telling the kids on Saturday about what's going on. I'm not looking forward to it, I admitted. I'm sure you're not. Good luck with that. If you need anything, call me or David, okay? Thanks, I signed off and silently hung up. I thought about telling the kids that evening, but changed my mind. Some of them might decide to call their mother and warn her. I wanted to minimize that risk. Sheila called in the evening around 8 o'clock, and her voice was very chipper. She was enjoying the convention and the various booths. She had a nice room and the restaurant served very good food. She talked to me briefly, but spent more time on the phone with Angie and Ben. She gave us her room number, 1228. When the kids went to bed at the usual time, 10 o'clock, I waited until I was sure they were asleep and then called the hotel and asked for room 1228. If Sheila answered, I would just say goodnight and say something nice to her. The phone rang at least 7 or 8 times, but there was no answer. I hung up. Sheila called on Friday night, again at about the same time. As before, we had a brief conversation, and then she talked to Angie and Ben. Her voice was different. Perhaps the excitement of the convention had passed, or maybe something else. On Saturday, she called early, just before 6 o'clock. Fortunately, we were all home. Once again, our conversation was short and not very personal. She was going out to dinner with a large group and, according to her, wouldn't be home until late. I was not displeased. I was relieved. When Angie, Ben, and I sat down to dinner, the table was very quiet. We all seemed to be immersed in our own thoughts. Finally, I realized that I couldn't put it off any longer. We cleared the table, put the dishes in the dishwasher, and I turned to them both. Kids, I need to talk to you about something, I began. Ben and Angie looked at me, and I sensed that they were guessing what it was about. There's no easy way to tell you about it, so I'll just tell you what's going to happen. I reached into my pocket and pulled out 2 shiny new house keys. These are your new keys to this house. The only person who has them is me. Your mother is not coming back to our house, I finally forced myself to say. Angie gasped, and Ben's eyes widened and his mouth dropped open. For the past year, your mother has been having an affair with her boss, Terry Gilson. She betrayed me, you, and her marriage vows. I can no longer live with her, and I will not allow her in this house. I paused. Oh, Dad. Oh, no, Angie cried. Why did she do that? I don't know, but honestly, that's not the main thing on my mind right now. I know it's going to hurt you. There's nothing I can do about it. She, has been with Mr. Gilson at least twice a week for the last year. That's over 100 times. My anger started to come out, and I saw Ben wince slightly. This convention she's attending, it's nothing more than a smokescreen so they can be together for the weekend. Well, they're not fooling anyone, I muttered. Dad, what's going to happen? Asked Ben, still shocked by my words. I've filed for divorce, and your mother will be served with papers as soon as she gets back into town. There will be some other things happening with Mr. Gilson, but you don't have to worry about that right now. I'll update you on them as they happen. I paused again. I'm sure they must have been shocked by my comments in the last 5 minutes. Does this mean I'll never see my mom again? Asked Ben, on the verge of tears. No. I wouldn't do that to you, Ben. I know how important she is to you, and I wouldn't do that. You'll probably live with her from the beginning. When you're 18, like Angie, you can see both of us anytime you want. Angie, you can decide where you want to live. It will be your choice, I said, looking into my daughter's sad eyes. That sucks, Dad. It's splitting up the family. It sucks, she said with tears in her eyes. Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, it's the courts that make those decisions, not me. I've thought long and hard about this. I suppose I could tell your mother everything I know and just move on with my life. But I couldn't do that. I have to admit I'm very, very angry with your mother. She lied to us. She lied to us. I don't think I could just turn the other cheek, I admitted. Ben turned and quietly walked up the stairs to his room and closed the door behind him. He's in shock, I thought. I'll go up and sit with him in a little while, when he's had time to comprehend what's about to happen. I turned to Angela, and she looked at me sadly, and then stepped toward me and hugged me. I'm so sorry, Daddy. I know how much it hurts. I can't believe she did that again, she cried. I threw my head back and stared at my daughter. Again? Angie nodded, lowering her eyes. Tell me, please, I said softly. It was 4 years ago. My period had just started, and I was having trouble getting my period. One morning when I was in class, I started having severe cramps. I went to the nurse's office and she sent me home with a note from my mom telling me what to get. When I walked into the house, she and Mr. Morissette were sitting on the couch. It was pretty clear what they were doing. I must have screamed and ran upstairs to my room. I heard them talking and moving around, and then the door slammed. A few minutes later, my mom came into my room. At this point, Angie broke down, and the tears began to flow in earnest. What happened next? I had to be patient. I had to let Angie tell me in her own way. Mom said if I told you or anyone else, you'd get divorced and I'd never see you again. She said the courts always give custody to the mothers, and you'll be so mad at her that you'll probably move away, and I won't see you at all. She looked up at me and shook her head. I was scared, Daddy. I believed her. I couldn't lose you. Not then, not ever again. I guess I promised Mom I wouldn't tell anyone. Except Ben. I never told until now. I put my arms around her again and pulled her to me. That conniving bitch had used Angie's love for me against herself and blackmailed her into silence. So Gilson wasn't the first, and he wasn't the only one. I began to wonder how many there could have been. How could I have been so stupid? How had she managed to pull all this off without me suspecting a thing? Had I been so stupid that I hadn't noticed what was happening? Or, was she smarter than I gave her credit for? Angie, I don't know what to tell you except that I love you. I'm going to do everything in my power to be a good father, no matter what happens in the future. You're old enough to make your own decisions, and I want you to know that whatever decision you make, I will support you, and it won't change my love for you. I didn't think I could say anything else. Thank you, Dad. I know that, and I know I want to be here with you. You need someone, and I think you're with me. She smiled through her tears. We hugged again. I think I better go upstairs and talk to Ben. I'm sure this is going to be really hard for him to get over. You said you told him about Mr. Morissette? Yes. About a month after it happened. Ben said she was acting strange, and he noticed that Mom and I were kind of avoiding each other. I told him about what I'd seen. And how did he react? I asked. Funny. Like it wasn't a big surprise, or maybe he suspected something, Angie replied thoughtfully. I was sure he'd think I was lying, but he didn't say anything at all. He just mouthed off and kept it to himself. I nodded and stood up, heading for the stairs in Ben's room. I knocked softly, then turned the knob and gently pushed the door open. Ben was sitting on the bed, staring out the window with empty eyes. It took him a few seconds to acknowledge me, but he still didn't say anything. I'm sorry, Ben. You know I wouldn't hurt you if I could help it. I hope you understand. I couldn't let things continue the way they were, I said quietly. He nodded and turned to me. I'm sorry too, Dad. Mom really hurt a lot of people, didn't she? He said in a barely audible whisper. Yes, she did. I don't know what will come of all this, but I'm sure your grandparents will be very upset with her, I replied. Why, Dad? Why? I have no idea, Ben. She's never given me even a hint that she's unhappy or dissatisfied with her life. Not one hint, I repeated. I hate her, he suddenly muttered. No. Don't do that, Ben. She loves you, you can be sure of that. It's something else, something I don't understand. Maybe she doesn't either. But don't let your anger consume you. I know you love her. Perhaps in time you can forgive her. I know she would never want to hurt you or Angie. Never, I said in as positive a tone as possible. He turned to me again with a devastated look. I put my hand on his shoulder to reassure him. After a few minutes, I got up and walked out of his room, closing the door behind me. After my awakening on Sunday morning, all hell broke loose. Sheila tried to call home, but I got Angie and Ben and we headed out for breakfast. We may not have had much of an appetite, but we needed to get out of the house. I also turned off my phone and asked Angie to do the same with hers. I didn't want Sheila pissing her off over nothing else. I told the kids what I had done by calling early in the morning, and Angie laughed. Ben smiled, and I realized they approved. Why didn't I feel better then? After breakfast, we drove to the park by the river, and the three of us went for a walk. I think in some strange way we all felt better. Perhaps because all the tension and anticipation of what was to come had subsided. Angie and Ben knew what was coming next, and they knew when it was going to happen. As for me, I had a knot tied in my stomach that in no way wanted to dissolve. I had begun the process that would end with the dissolution of my marriage and the breakup of my family. I still had to talk to my parents, but that was one of the two important things to do today. Of course, I would also call Lydia and tell her what I had done. I was dreading talking to George and Amy Pratt, Sheila's parents. We were close, and they adored their grandchildren. I wasn't sure how they would take the news or which side they would take. I decided to leave it at that until Sheila could decide for herself. She needed a place to live, and I suspected she would run home. I called Lydia Pancratz first. I told her about my little prank, and she laughed at my insolence too. Now that's something I wouldn't want to get, she grinned. I hope you enjoyed yourself, Mick. Not really. Cheap revenge, I guess. But now she knows, and she knows some of the consequences, I said, noticing the note of anger in my voice. What about the kids, Mick? I talked to them last night, and I think things are stable. They're not very happy, as you can imagine, but they understand, and I think we'll have to wait and see what the long-term effects on them are, I said. But I have another surprise. What? Lydia was taken aback for a moment. Angie told me that about 4 years ago she caught her mother with another man. Sheila threatened Angie. She told her that I would divorce her, she would get custody of them, and they would never see me again. She blackmailed her into keeping quiet, I concluded. Oh my God. Could she do that? Asked Lydia in amazement. I thought I knew her. I was wrong. I don't know her at all. She's just a disgusting woman, I said, more with regret than anger. Lydia must have been wondering what was next. After a few moments of silence, she spoke again. Stay close to Angie and Ben, Mick. They need you around. It's going to be hell for them for a while. Stay close to them, she concluded. Thanks again for your help, Lydia. As soon as I know where Sheila ends up, I'll let you know, and you can attend to her. We signed off and I slammed my cell phone shut. Getting through to my parents was going to be much harder. The conversation with my parents was thankfully short. I described the situation, and their first reaction was concern for Angie and Ben. I recounted my conversations with them last night and the fact that they seemed fine today. This seemed to reassure my mom, and both said they would talk to us later when things had settled down. I wondered when that would be myself. I turned the phone off again. It beeped, letting me know I had a call waiting for me, and I was pretty sure it was Sheila. She wasn't on my list to talk to today. Angie, Ben, and I sat down on a picnic bench in the park, and I explained that I didn't want to be near our house for the next few hours. I expected their mother to rush home to try to get in. Finding that her key was useless, she would surely make a ruckus. I suggested we go out of town and not show up there until just before dinner, and then come back. They agreed, and we discussed where we could go. There was an open air fair in a small town a few miles south, and we decided to see what it was all about. The fair turned out to be very interesting and fun. We ate a few hot dogs to get us through dinner and generally enjoyed an old-fashioned country fair. It took our minds off our problems and allowed us to think about something else. We didn't get back into town until almost 7 and stopped at a nice restaurant for dinner. We knew that sooner or later we would have to face changes in our lives, but on this last day, we could get away from it all and find some peace and quiet. By the time we got home, it was almost 9 o'clock. Sheila was nowhere to be seen and the house was dark. I parked the car in the garage and we walked into the house, turning on the lights as we went. Nothing had changed in the house since we left for breakfast this morning. The kids had gone to their rooms and got ready for bed. I turned on the TV, but there was nothing interesting on, so I went to bed as well. It was a restless night for me. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I knew that my phone call and serving the divorce papers would have consequences. It was only a matter of time. Monday morning, I reconnected the phones. I didn't expect to hear from Sheila so early. I was wrong. Almost immediately, the phone rang. We didn't have caller ID, so I had no idea who would be calling this early. I decided to tempt fate. Hello? It was a cautious greeting on my part. Mick, please. We need to talk. Of course, I was Sheila. What is there to talk about? I asked in a low voice, trying not to disturb the kids. Oh my God, Mick. I'll tell you what. I can explain. It's not what you think, she moaned. That's the second time you've said that. What do you think I think? I challenged. It wasn't like an affair. It was just a stupid mistake. Don't ruin our marriage over a stupid mistake, she pleaded. You must think I'm the stupidest person on the planet, Sheila. I know for a fact that you've been having fun with asshole Gilson for at least a year. And now I know that Francis Morissette is on your buddy list. We have photos and all the proof we need. It won't be pretty, Sheila, and you have no one to blame but yourself. I promise you it will be ugly. With those words, I hung up and disconnected the phone again. I went to work and informed Larry Coleman that I was divorcing my wife, and if she called, I asked him not to transfer the call. He agreed and quickly went to Gloria's switchboard to inform her of our request. I went back to my office and tried to burrow into the papers on my desk. I was pretty good at it until about 11 o'clock in the morning when the phone rang. It was George Pratt, my father-in-law. Good morning, George. I can guess why you're calling. I apologize for not giving you and Amy a heads up, I said preemptively. I think I understand, but I'd like to hear it from you, Mick. You've always been straightforward with me, so tell me what the hell happened, he asked demandingly. I told him about my warnings to Sheila about Gilson, her affair with him, and her other affair with Morissette. When I finished with a condensed version of her activities, a long silence hung on the line. My God, he finally said slowly in a thin voice. I had no idea she was capable of such a thing. Are you absolutely sure about this, Mick? He asked, hoping there was some glimmer of relief in that. I'm very sorry, George. I'm afraid I'm not only sure, But I have photographic evidence, I said, feeling sorry for this fine man. He deserved better from his daughter. She's staying here for now, Mick. Are you planning to start divorce proceedings? Yes. All the paperwork is ready. She'll get a summons either at work or... Well, I'm sorry, but it can happen at your house, I apologized. I understand. I don't mind telling you that it will hurt not only her, but her mother as well. I know it's not your fault, but, well, whatever. I hope we'll still get grandchildren to visit us, Mick, he finished hopefully. Of course. This isn't about you or Amy, George. I would never do that to you or the kids. You're always welcome here, I said sincerely. Thanks, Mick. I'm sorry. But thanks, he said sadly and hung up. As I put the phone back on the stand, my emotions left me. I expected there would be more moments like this in the coming weeks and months. I had to prepare for them. I learned that Sheila had gone to work that morning and, amazingly, was still working. Gilson had no idea that all of this could come crashing down on his head at one point, and apparently decided to let things run their course. When Lydia confirmed that my wife was on time for work, she sent a bailiff to her, and no sooner had she had her morning coffee than the divorce papers were in her hands. According to observers, she immediately broke down and ran out of the building. My guess is she fled to her parents' house. But that wasn't the most interesting part. Shortly thereafter, Terry Gilson and Knox Gilson were served with court orders stating my intention to sue for damages based on alienation of affection and willful disregard of corporate responsibility. That is, failure to comply with the morals clause in specific employee contracts. The lawsuits included punitive and compensatory damages in the amount of $5 million. The circus is on. Reconstructing the story much later, I learned that Knox Gilson had set up a showdown with his son Terry and practically cut him off. No more easy jobs, no more rescue from situations with angry husbands, and unless he pulled himself together, no more inheritance. Knox had indulged his son for the past 20-plus years and was finally at the end of his tether. Sooner or later, this sprouting teenager had to get back on his feet. Terry did what was completely predictable. He went out and got drunk. Since he had been kicked out of the dealership, he had nowhere to go but back to his townhouse. He disappeared into this cave for days. I knew the wheels of justice would turn slowly. Foolishly, Sheila decided to contest the divorce until Lydia could provide her attorney with the evidence we had, including photographs. That was all it took to knock the fighting spirit out of her. Lydia would do her best to limit the amount of my financial punishment, but at worst, she would get half of everything. A reward for her perfidy. The week passed agonizingly slowly. I went to work, but I couldn't pretend to work efficiently. Larry was very understanding and patient, but I knew it couldn't go on like this forever. I had to think about my future as a single man and a single parent. It was a daunting prospect. On Saturday, I was mowing the lawn in the backyard when I heard a noise in the driveway. A car door slammed, and seconds later I heard someone pounding on my front door. Neither Angie nor Ben was home, so I walked around the side of the house and ran head-on into Terry Gilson. He looked like he'd been dragged behind a farm tractor for several miles. He was a mess, but at one look at his face, I knew it wasn't good. That was the last thing I remember before he hit me with his big right fist. And the next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital. Well, not exactly waking up, but starting to experience small bouts of consciousness. I was lying on my back and feeling numb pain. Apparently, it took me over 24 hours to finally regain consciousness. I was floating in and out of consciousness, barely grasping bits and pieces of the here and now. At one point, I realized there was someone with me. I could feel a hand, but I couldn't open my eyes, or at least I didn't want to. They were like two marbles rolling around in the bottom of a tin can. I heard a strange voice, but although it was familiar, I couldn't connect it to my memories to see who it could have been. I tried to remember what could have brought me to that place, and after a while I remembered Gilson's face and then his fist. A day or so later, I discovered that my mother and Angie had been at my bedside almost the entire time I was in the ICU. I tried to smile at them, but it hurt, and I hoped they realized how grateful I was to have them around. I think I heard Angie tell me Ben was coming over after school, and I tried to smile again. Just thinking about it hurt. It was over a week before I recovered enough to talk to my doctor. He started literally from the beginning. I had a concussion from hitting the wooden frame of the garage door when Gilson hit me. I had a dislocated right shoulder and a badly bruised upper right arm. What saved me was that Felicia Romano, who had witnessed most of the altercation, yelled from her kitchen window, causing Gilson to look up and realize he was being watched. He rushed to his car, backed out of our driveway, and rubber-tired the entire block. Felicia had the good sense to call 911, and that's how I ended up in the hospital. Gilson was identified by both Felicia and another neighbor, who recognized the license plate number of his car as it sped down our street. There aren't many white 1964 Ford Galaxy convertibles in our town, and a couple hours later, Gilson was spotted leaving a bar and driving away in an inadequate manner. To top off the woes, Gilson was arrested for DUI and resisting arrest. He just didn't know when to leave. When they put him in a cell, they matched the assault complaint filed by Mrs. Felicia Romano and my admission to the hospital. After questioning Felicia, they charged Gilson with aggravated assault, assault with intent, and criminal trespassing. He was in deep shit, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. When he called his father from prison, Knox Gilson didn't answer the phone. I wish I could have been there, but I was unconscious and lying on the operating table having my spleen removed. 2 days after I began to have permanent lucidity, a plainclothes officer came to me and asked me to testify. I told him everything I remembered, which wasn't much. A face red with anger and a big fist. He asked what might have prompted the attack, and I told him about Terry's affair with my wife, the divorce, and the lawsuits. He nodded a couple times and thanked me, then left. Epilogue. At the Division of Property and Divorce Court, Sheila wasn't too nice. I will be buying her share of our house. They gave her the absolute minimum and no alimony, and gave her a stern lecture on her contribution to my injuries. Knox fired both Terry and Sheila. She was on the job hunt when our divorce became final. Her name was toxic in some circles, and I doubted if she would ever find a decent job in our town. Ben lives with Sheila, but from what I gather from Angie's words, their relationship isn't what it used to be. I see Ben every week on weekends. We got an exemption from the judge about that. He seems to be getting stronger, but he's not the same kid I remember from better times. Angie is Angie. She's my girl, and she keeps me in line. She runs the house, my diet, and my exercise program. If I didn't know better, she could have been my mother. My in-laws have been a pillar of support and have helped us when needed. They have no idea how important that was in the last few weeks. I just didn't need any more pressure. George and Amy, thank goodness, have remained friends. They are deeply disappointed in Sheila, but she is their only child, and they feel obligated to support her in her time of need. Having Ben around is a big plus for them. They're spoiling him in a way, but I don't mind. I just want Ben to get through this and come out of it in one piece. Angie stops by to visit. She and her mother talk to each other again, but I get the impression it's an awkward relationship at best. The lawsuits, of course, will never go to trial. Knox Gilson won't let it, according to my lawyer friends Dave and Lydia. We'll settle for a very large sum, and I'll be secured for years to come, even after taxes and legal fees. I already know I'll be able to take care of Angie and Ben's college tuition and provide them with a car. At least some good will come out of this whole mess. Physically, I've recovered as much as I possibly can. I lost my spleen, but my kidneys, ribs, and shoulder are almost healed. I go to physical therapy 3 times a week and will continue to do so for a while longer. I still have pains that come and go daily. My doctor thinks my testicles are 80% functioning, but I haven't had a chance to have them checked yet. I don't have much enthusiasm for the opposite sex right now. When I have the money from the trial, I intend to buy Jimmy and Felicia something special. Jimmy has been there for me when I needed him, and Felicia may have saved my life. Nothing would be too extravagant for these two. What happens next? I ask myself regularly. I'm still reeling from what Sheila did to us, but I suppose in time I'll get over the worst of it. I quit Polar Industries, or at least tried to. Larry didn't want to hear about it and said he was giving me an indefinite leave of absence. Someday I'd have a lot of money, and I was trying to decide what I should do with it. I think I know. Frank Clay, one of my best customers and an old friend from when I first started in sales, wants to retire and sell his building materials business. It's a good business with a well-balanced trade between retail and building clients. He is part of the Build Right buying group, and that helps him compete with the big stores. Dave Murney and I are going to meet with old Frank and see if we can make it happen. Ben was first in line looking for weekend and summer work when he heard about my plan. It doesn't make any difference. I want to keep him close and make sure he's okay while he experiences the next few years. Adolescence is hard enough as it is, and then there's the broken family. I look at Knox and Terry Gilson and realize that this is what happens when you're not involved enough in your kids' lives or close enough to them. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened to me and our family. I will be the first to admit that I took it personally and wanted revenge to the fullest. I still feel the same way. Perhaps if I had only had to deal with Gilson, things would have been different. I guess I can imagine how he might have swayed and charmed someone like Sheila. But when I found out about Morissette and how she blackmailed our daughter to silence her, all thoughts of compassion vanished. Dave says Terry will spend 2 to 4 years in prison for her assault on me. We've talked about a civil suit too, but there will be no one to sue. His father disowned him, he has no job, no skills, and no prospects. When he gets out of prison, he will be in his early 50s, and a bleak future awaits him. There's nothing more we can do to hurt him. Surprisingly, Knox Gilson came to see me when I was in rehab. He apologized for everything that had happened and for his deadbeat son. I accepted his apology as sincere. He was well aware that the emotional damage his son had done to me was accompanied by physical damage. We shook hands, and I raised my opinion of Mr. Gilson Sr. a notch or two. That's all there is to it. Sad story. I thought I had the perfect family. Hell, I was sure I had the perfect family. I can look back remembering the good times we had together, or I can look back in anger. Maybe someday I can do the former, because right now I'm still dealing with the latter. The end. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.